This month, in the tradition of Judeo-Christian faith, it focuses on a singular birth. Metaphysically, we try to take that singular birth narrative and bring it to a universal birth. And as we look at that and we examine that and our beliefs and the allegory or where it is in the margin of that belief in terms of the actual Christic birth, the Christ consciousness, we get to pause and look at how am I exemplifying that in my own humanity. I love this time of year because we seem to give ourselves greater permission for self-examination. You ever noticed the words of Socrates are so powerful and true that the unexamined life isn't worth living? So when we get to these calendar milestones, we begin to reflect more. At least we give ourselves permission to reflect more. And I want to ask you to think about what's happened between last December and this December. How have you evolved? How have you devolved? How have you let the world, and it's really good at this, how have you let the world rob you of your joy? How have you and I collectively and individually forgotten the truth of the sustainability of that joy, or what is known as the living spirit? The living spirit is the theme for December that Centers for Spiritual Living chose. And as I look at that phrase, the living spirit, I'm really enthralled by the word living, because it is just so out of the box and so individuated and yet so powerful with regards to how we take that to heart and how we show up in the world. How has my degree of livingness increased since last year? How has my degree of livingness retreated? And as we begin to look at that and consider the fact that the birth of livingness, the birth of this Christ consciousness that creates this portal of celebration and examination of the illumination of light, where am I with that? And how have I allowed myself to forego a renewal or a continual birthing process? Raymond Charles Barker, who was an iconic religious science minister who was actually the teacher in New York City of the founder of this center, Kennedy Schultz, he wrote that birth is always taking place wherever you are. Something is forever being born into form. Therefore, other things are dying out of form. This is one endless play of life upon itself. What you mentally and emotionally embody is born into your world. Not only select what you want in life, but select also those things that you no longer want. In other words, let them die. If you have a pen and a paper, you might want to write some of these phrases down, because I think they're very impactful. If you take notes, or if you have a phone and you take notes, not only select what you want in this energy of this living spirit, select it. By selection, I mean you have the power to decide. I want that. I want that. I want that. In order for me to have those things, you also have to examine, what must I let die? Or what must I make space for? You understand the physics behind that, right? The vacuum. That whatever we make space for, we create that vacuum, that vacuum, by its very nature, must be filled. And the beauty of understanding that metaphysically is that it's then not randomly filled by the same old, like whatever was going on a year ago. But that as I let go, if I let something die into its nature, if I stop giving my attention to it, space is occurring. And now, rather than the space being filled by default, I intentionally select what that space is going to create and be inside of me. He says, they will move out of your experience if you refuse to sustain them with your attention. The old order has to pass away to let God create what you want. The clutter of the present has to be streamlined to allow the future to take place. That phrase, the old order, What is your old order? I'll tell you what my old order was. The last of a tribe of children, a mother widowed when I was 7, living in a flat-top shack in no kidding, in Beaumont, Texas, and watching a perpetual life of angst. And I'm sure your stories are similar to mine, or you have something like that, where we lost ourselves. And we began to absorb like a sponge those particular surroundings, thinking that that's what life was, until we venture out into the world and we open our minds. Or our diseased mentality becomes so despondent that we fall down to our knees and we surrender into something new. Some of us travel down a road of addiction. Some of us travel down a road of codependency. Some of us travel down a road of hesitancy and fear. Some of us have all of those roads combined into one superhighway. And some of us venture off that road and we say, enough. And we begin to understand the power and the potency of letting something die. I want to tell you that it's invaluable. It's imperative to understand the necessity of your birth into consciousness. Without it, and I'm going to use a very charged word, a very emotional word, without it, we remain stillborn. I want you to think about the fact that there could be women in this very room who have actually had the sorrowful experience of giving birth to a stillborn child. And I want you to think about the definition of stillborn, which is having failed to develop or succeed, something unrealized. When you think about the overarching capacity of that word stillborn, that describes some of our lives when we have not been willing to venture off into a pathway of livingness. And I know it's a touchy subject, but when we begin this pathway of accountability, we have to begin to let die the excuses that someone else prevented me from being birthed into expansion. And so what is so sacred and so holy about this time is that if we're willing to participate, we go into that illumination. We go into that sacredness. And we begin to say yes. Yes to that living spirit as a macrocosmic field, which we intellectually get, that is filled with all kinds of far-reaching possibility that we haven't even been able to define yet. But that field is also in us. And so livingness then becomes a matter of degree. I have a particular level of degree, a thermometer of degree, a thermometer of willingness, where I say yes to this particular experience. Or I have a thermometer of degree that is stalled and pushed and repressed and sustained and covered and veiled because of whatever domestication or whatever that old order was for me that I've yet to break free from. And as we sit, we're packed this morning. As we sit in this room, we realize that everybody is floating and fluctuating in that degree, in that thermometer, given our respective levels of self-awareness. It's neither right nor wrong. It's just what is. But as we sit here, as we listen, as we take what it is that we can understand and we individualize it, then something gets triggered, a good trigger. Something gets triggered inside of us that says, I want a greater degree of livingness inside of me. And so what is beautiful about that is we are called upon to go back to birth. Birth. When you think of birth and the beauty of birth, when you think about just the archetype of a child, what does that archetype represent? Purity. What does that archetype represent? Wholeness, love. It's the beautiful thing that has not developed the muscle of cynicism. It's the beautiful thing that knows no bigotry or prejudice. It's the beautiful thing that waits in expectancy and has no qualms whatsoever crying out for what it needs. Because it has not yet formulated what's good or bad, right or wrong, defined by its environment. It just is. In its beautiful, pure state. That's what the birth represents. The Christ consciousness in this season of light is begging you and I to go back to the origin of that purity and giving it a life. And by giving it a life, meaning ramping up or amping up our degree of livingness as it is with that. Our wonderful text called The Science of Mind, which was written by our founder, Ernest Holmes, says that if we think we can guide our brother or sister aright, while our own feet still walk in darkness, we are mistaken. We must first clarify our own vision. Then we shall become as lights, lighting the way for others. But can we teach a lesson that we have not learned? Can we give that which we do not possess? To suppose so is hypocrisy, a thing to be shunned. The master teacher Jesus tears the mantle of unreality from the shoulders of hypocrisy, winnowing from the soul of sham and shallowness its last shred of illusion. We cannot see capital R reality until our eyes are open, until the light of eternal truth has struck deeply into our souls. What he is offering here in this passage is that when we allow ourselves to be birthed into the expansion of light, then and only then are we like lighthouses that can illuminate and shine for others. It becomes a little bit ludicrous for us to think that we can guide someone else when we are not able to guide ourselves. So we start to understand the power of that personal responsibility. We start to understand that no one can actually do the birthing process for us. That in this humanity, in this state, we are here to birth ourselves into that greater expression. And as we do that, we learn the lessons. And as we learn the lessons, we are able to guide and to educate and be the living example for others. As I've often said, people don't want to hear a sermon. They want to see a sermon. That doesn't just go for me up here, that goes for you in our daily lives. So Friday I was sitting with Dr. Will Coleman, and somehow the topic of what was your first job ever came up. And what prompted you to get that first job? And I had to laugh because as I thought about it, I thought the thing that prompted my first job was my mother's bad cooking. God rest Genevieve's soul, but she was not a good cook. And being the youngest of the family, I didn't even know what salt was. I had not tasted salt until after my father's death because he had this ongoing heart challenge. And so he was instructed by his doctors to eliminate salt. So she just eliminated salt from all cooking. And every week we ate something called hash. Hash was a stew pot filled with whatever was left over. And it just kept piling into this pot. And she would continue to reheat it. So it was, and hit it too, yeah. And I was trying to hit it, hide it. But it was just the most god-awful thing you've ever put in your mouth. And lunches, school lunches in elementary school. You know how kids would trade? I never had anything to trade. I had some hash in a cellophane bag. I had some pretty nasty sandwiches. And I don't know how it happened, but somehow I was gifted with a meal from the cafeteria when I was in second grade. And I thought that heaven had descended upon me. I think it was in Texas, it was called chicken fried steak. I don't know if you've ever had chicken fried steak with cream gravy. I thought I had just met Jesus on a plate. And I said, how can I have more of this? And so in my high water pants in second grade, I went into the cafeteria lady behind the cashier and asked if I could have a job. And she looked at me and in her cafeteria wisdom said, why, yes, you can. And so from the second grade through the fifth grade, I was at school every morning at 6:45 to take the chairs off of the tables in the cafeteria. And I then got a free lunch every day. And every Thursday was chicken fried steak day. And it didn't matter if I had the flu or the measles or the chicken pox, violently throwing up. I was at school on Thursday and every other day from that. And Dr. Will said, well, so it was your mama's hash that moved you ash. And I said, yes, it was. But you see, what was so great about that was the fact that I didn't know any better. I didn't know that I couldn't walk in and ask for a job at 8 years old. I didn't know that such things as what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. You see, we have over-intellectualized and over-analyzed all of those things now in our adult state. So much so that we neglect or veil over the opportunity for something new to be birthed within us. All you have to do is march into that experience with a willingness and ask. What does the scripture say? Ask, and you shall receive. Know that by asking, something must, through the power of law, through the formula of law, be delivered unto us. That is a form of birth. If we don't do that, then we are not letting the mystery die its death. And so we remain in the ideology that nothing else is different and that things remain the same for the remainder of our lives. And so we get to look at the degree of livingness within our own spirit and say, where am I not asking? Where am I not showing up? Where am I not having that experience that elevates me above what I've always known to be? And what requires us to have that? It is as simple as showing up. And it is as simple as notating how much cynicism we do have and how quickly we deflect anything that's different than what is happening in present day. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you give yourself permission to do that, your whole world opens up. I don't care how old you are. Once you achieve, open up, and experience a higher degree of livingness, it is impossible to go back to an old standard because you are creating a new normal. So here I am at 8 thinking, okay, if I want something, I just have to go ask. And I have to be willing to work, participate, collaborate for that thing. When we would drive to church, we had a rusty old station wagon, and it seemed as though First Assemblies of God in Beaumont, Texas was clear across town because it felt like forever to get to church every week. I think my oldest sister, Becky, probably for most of those years was the chief principal driver. And on our way back from church, there was a convenience store on this little curved road, and she would pull in. And she would always get out and get something for my mom and herself. But what I noticed at this convenience store was this metal spiral book thing that had little paperbacks in it. And there was Black Beauty in there, the story of the horse. And I wanted that book. That book was 79 cents. And my mother said no. I wanted that book. Next week, can I have that book? No. Next week, no. About a month's worth of no's, I finally decided that there must be a way for me to get a hold of 79 cents. And so the lawnmower and the gas can became my method. The lawnmower, I was a short kid. The handle of the lawnmower was like this. And I'm walking down Abilene Avenue in Beaumont, Texas, asking people if I can mow their lawn. They all said yes, I think just because of the spectacle of it. But the amount of quarters then that I began to collect from that allowed me to not just buy the Black Beauty book, but to buy the Lost in Space book and all of the other books that I wanted, so that I began to create and build my own library. And I look at that and I say, there you go. There is the experience of that. There is the thing whereby, am I going to sit and just accept the no? Or am I going to do something about it? That's what I think this time of year asks of us, because we've had a whole year of livingness. But I want to ask you, what was the degree of that livingness? I want to ask you, how many times, myself included, have we forgotten, comparative to how many times did we allow ourselves to let go of control and experience something new? Because that which is the living in spirit within us is just waiting for permission. Is just waiting for permission. So we get to die to the story of what you and I can't have. We get to die to the excuse of our age. We get to dissolve the accumulation of our resistance. And we get to begin to open up to the collaborative energy of what the world is waiting for. In the Science of Mind text, we find that everything is movement. Everything we can take hold of and analyze. All things in the physical world of form are in a certain rate of vibration, or are an effect. The world of effect is all around us. Our lives are our personal laboratory, our indicator of our own vibrational frequency. And so the consciousness that by thinking created what we are experiencing today can also be unconstructed by our unthinking. What simple, small, short practice can you use in your life that will begin to assist you in creating an experience of freedom, an experience of health, an experience of abundance or love? The revelation of Christ consciousness blesses everyone, because, here's something else you can write down, there is no private good. Isn't that a great sentence? Ernest Holmes said there is no private good. In other words, there isn't just a reservation of good and expansion just for people who are quote, quote, deserving, because good just is. Just as love just is. When we understand the vibratory nature of good, let's say that the vibratory nature of good is the chicken fried steak in the cafeteria on Thursday. Sorry, vegans and vegetarians, but it's a papaya leaf wrapped with mango chunks. Whatever it is for you. If we don't go acquaint ourselves with the good, it's not that the good isn't there. It's that we're just not willing to take that step. There is no private good. So the good that you're witnessing being exemplified by somebody directly in your circle of influence, the good that you witness on social media that somebody else has created and that you secretly ache for, the good that you wish could happen, but you feel you're too old or too resistant or too unqualified or whatever the excuses are, all of those things then create a narrative inside of you that says good is privatized. Love is privatized. Peace is privatized, when nothing could be further from the truth. If your narrative is I hate this time of year, I hate the memories that it brings up, I hate the stress that is induced, I hate all of the activity, or I love it, but it's such a challenge, or whatever it is, you get to understand that it is a narrative that is self-imposed. That there is no privatization. There is no private good. It's just the foundation by which life is asking us to walk upon. He wrote, Ernest Holmes, "We cannot come unto the Father which art in heaven except through our own nature." It's the same thing as Scripture saying, it is God's great pleasure to give you the kingdom. Well, the kingdom is already here, but most of us only accept a back alley house because we don't have the consciousness of a kingdom. So between now and next year, where will we be in December? Some of us might not even be here. Some of us might be doing the same old thing, complaining about the same stuff, worrying about the same issues. And some of us will have grasped hold of these ideas, and our degree of livingness will have skyrocketed. And what we understand is it's the same good. It's the same playing field. It's the same world. And so it's time for us to get busy. So I have an assignment for you. What I want is for you to get ready for your own inauguration. Your inauguration. Your inauguration and your cabinet that you are going to pick. And the people who serve on your cabinet are the people who are going to have a really high vibrational sense of livingness. So whoever is your secretary of good, whoever it is that you're going to choose to associate with, becomes a self-imposed invitation for your own inauguration. And guess what? Whatever the world governs has no bearing on your self-governance as long as it's rooted in consciousness. Do you get that? I think we need to remind one another of that. I think we begin to see what happens when that old paradigm of suppression can no longer breathe. When people in the thousands show up to support our Native American people, in spite of the spin that gets issued on television, because they know what the truth is. And so let's begin to turn things off. What's the components of birth and death? Whatever you stop giving attention to must die. It's time to change the narrative. It's time to change the focus. It's time to get serious about what is this upcoming 2017 going to be individually for you, because I want you to know the power of the individual choice, because it ripples out to all of the immediacy of your world. It's easy for us sometimes to do it in here collectively, but what I am asking you is to make this the year that your own being stands firm and tall and proud and intentionally chooses to surround itself with what is necessary for our evolution. It's time to stand up tall, proud. And in so doing, we perpetually spiral up. We accept nothing less than this. I want you to feel what that feels like to say, I accept nothing less than this.
I accept nothing less than this.
How does that make you feel? So that's your mantra. I accept nothing less than this good, this expansive livingness. I accept nothing less than this. And I want you to own the responsibility that comes with that mantra. And let us still stand tall and firm in rejoicing as we enter into this season of light. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.